Okay, in this next version of Affinity Designer, we're going to create some ads. So let's start with File, New. Again, this is Web. We'll set it to 800 by 800 pixels again. And we'll stick with RGB. And then we'll click OK. So in this first thing, we're going to create the Leon's advertisement. So the first thing we need to do is create a rectangle. And we want to make it very specific. So down here, we're going to set the origin points at 0, y 0, and then we're going to make it 800 wide and 550 high. Okay, now obviously we could color that, but in this case we're going to create a gradient. So grab the fill tool and drag upward, and that will create a gradient. And to use the gradient tool, all we need to do is select the nodes and give them a color. So let's lighten that color up a little bit. And great. So now we want to duplicate this object. So we're going to remember Command J. So we now have it duplicated, and we're just going to flip it right over. Nice. And you'll notice the two rectangles on one layer. And the next part, we're going to create the Leon's logo. So we're going to start out with a ellipse, and we want the ellipse to be yellow. And we also want it to have a stroke or an outside. So let's put a stroke on there. It's not bad. And the next step is we're going to put some text on there. So grab the text tool, type in Leon's. Obviously we want our text bigger. Now I want you to go through and pick out a font that you like that's close to the Leon's text. But for this case we're going to just quickly do this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to break my text apart. So obviously to change the font, I would select all of the text and come up here and find a text that looked great. And we'll choose that one, and then resize it slightly. Now, to be able to change the shape of the L, I need to come to Layer, and I need to convert it to a curve, but then I also need to go Layer and ungroup it. So now I can select the node tool. Let's zoom way in here for a second. And the Leon's, the L travels underneath to the O. So once I have my node tool, I can start moving that around to give it that kind of And remember, if I double click, I can add more nodes. I can round out my nodes. And to be honest, this is just going to take you some time to, manipulate the nodes to get it looking exactly the way you want it. I won't make you sit through all that. You kind of get the point. Okay, let's zoom back out for a second. I'm going to just turn off in my layers. I'm going to turn off my two rectangles for a second, and then I'm going to select everything here, and then I'm going to group it again. Okay, so we can turn those back on now. So the next thing I want to do is resize this slightly, and I want to duplicate it. Command J again, and flip it over. And now I want to create it so it's a mask. So to do that, I click on, make sure I have the right one. So I do. So I click on the mask tool, click on the mask layer, I then use the gradient tool again. I use the gradient tool, and again, but this time I'm going to set the gradients to black and white. And the black and white will actually create the fading out. So you'll notice right here I set it to black, and this one I'm going to set to white, and the white one will give us the most clear colors. So there's our mask. The next step is we want to have a picture from their website right here, and so we would go to the Leon's website. And so here we are at the Leon's, and we're going to just take a picture of their website. So we do Command-Shift-4, drag our box, and now we're going to place that web page on. Okay, if I want to skew an object, I simply select it. I come down here to where it says S and pull it down, and here's where I can create a skewed object. We're going to just slightly skew it, and as we did before, we're going to duplicate it and then invert it, and then we're going to need to skew it the opposite way. And then again, we're going to take that object, create a mask, click on our mask, and then use our gradient tool to fade it. Okay, the last part is to add in the English and the French, have them mirrored, but you can handle that. Okay, good luck. Sounds good.